Hi, Cheri.
Hi, Matthew.
How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Let me put you up here. There you go. Okay. Yeah, I was just asking just before we went recording if people had commented to you about being on the podcast, but you said at first somebody did, but not so much recently.
Yeah, not so much recently.
Okay.
So,
We got a few people watching and a few people commenting, which is nice,
oh, that's good.
about the conversations that we've been having.
Oh,
Now,
good.
but where did I actually put the gospel? It's over here. Okay. So 1 second, I'm going to share the screen and we'll see the gospel appear. Where did you go? Oh, you're there. Hi. Everything jumps around when I share the screen. I just have to find it again. Okay, here we go. Um, so we're just going to read this, but I'll talk a little bit about what's happening Sunday in a minute. Is that okay, Cheri?
Sure.
Okay. So I'll read about half and then I'll hand it over to you. About here, I guess.
Okay.
When evening had come, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped.
But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion, and they woke him up and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?
Okay, I wonder, Cheri, if there is a word or phrase that jumps out to you from the text you want to share now.
Yeah, it was interesting when it says just as he was.
Where is that?
It's and leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat just as he was.
Okay.
And I just thought that was an interesting thing to add to that part. Anyway, it just struck me.
Yeah. Okay. I think the words of Jesus jump out at me when the storm is raging, which is peace be still.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to read this again, Cheri. And normally I just focus on the text, but I want to focus on the context as well. This is
Okay.
Gospel preview on Wednesday, the 19th of June, which is also Juneteenth, which is now a holiday, and has been for a few years. And on Sunday, we're doing some reflection on Juneteenth. We have a community organizer coming and they're gonna talk to us about reparations and the California Reparations Board, and also African American music director from the East Coast, Quincy Dover is going to come and play music for us.
Mm,
So I want to keep that in mind as we read the text again, because like sometimes the context of what's going on in the world around us can help us see things in the text that we might not otherwise see.
mm-hmm.
And Juneteenth is that celebration of when the news of the Emancipation Proclamation finally got to Texas and was read out loud, and all of the slaves knew that they were free. Um, and so we can talk more about that later, but also this is obviously the story of Jesus calming the storm, um, which is a remarkable story of a sign of his divine ability and power to manage nature. Um, and and also there's a question here, I think, about the storms we face in life, as an allegory, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but also maybe the anxiety we feel when we don't feel faith. And so I say all of that and then I'll read it to you again. When evening had come, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat. I'm tripping over that phrase. They took him with them in the boat just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose and the waves beat into the boat so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace be still. When the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm, he said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Oh my goodness, I'm seeing things in the text, but it's not necessarily Juneteenth at the moment, but we can get to that. But your idea of just as he was, it was fascinating to me as I read it a second time, and it was kind of like playing in my mind. Just as he was, it's kind of like he didn't settle down, he didn't have dinner, he didn't like wash his face, he didn't pack a bag. They picked him up and they put him in the boat and they went, kind of thing. Just as he was. And then the thing that next struck me is that he's asleep on the cushion, and I realize, oh, he's exhausted. He fell asleep as soon as he got in the boat. When it says they put him just as he was in the boat, I think they saw that he was done. He was like wiped out. He was exhausted. His disciples swept in, picked him up, put him in the boat, get him away from here. Like he's got to go rest. We'll take him to the other side of the sea where we've got to go next. But like he's going to sleep in the boat because then he's going to probably get to the other side, not have much rest and get on with ministering to people. And so it's that moment, like, when you leave doing something really busy and you get in the car and you're just out, and he's just out. He's exhausted.
Right.
So I'm reading in maybe in the subtext, and could go back and have a look at the passage before in Mark. But he's been really busy and he's really exhausted, and he's just gonna fall asleep, whatever's going on. And he's so fast asleep that not even a huge storm is gonna wake him up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's how tired he is.
Yeah. I'm gonna put this up and drop it in our chat so that we can still see it, but we don't have to keep sharing the screen.
Okay. Well, the other thing that was really cool too is I was thinking about when it says, "Why are you afraid? Have you no faith?" And I thought, oh, you could kind of reverse that too. It's kind of like, if I have faith, I don't need to be afraid. So when I am afraid, I can say, well, I have faith. So then maybe I don't need to be so afraid. So that
But
was
like,
interesting.
is that pretending to have faith until you have it?
Or kind of like you have like, yeah, kind of, I mean, it's like, fake it till you make it, maybe, but I don't know that it's fake it till you make it. It's kind of like in other I guess what I would say is in other situations, I have faith.
Yeah.
And so therefore, uh, I can use that faith in the situation where I'm afraid. And maybe I don't need to be afraid because I need to remember I've got this faith. So it's kind of like, oh, it's kind of like our initial reaction, and especially to a life-threatening event. That's pretty scary.
Oh gosh. Okay. So it's like we have faith, but then our brain reacts as it immediately would react, and then we like stop, pause, take a deep breath, and say, "Wait a second. I actually have faith that this is going to be okay. I don't need to go with my first reaction. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay." I
So
kind
that's
of I sometimes describe that, Cheri, as the difference between my reactive mind and my wise mind. Does that make sense?
oh, yeah, that's a good way to
So,
put it.
or my anxious mind and my wise mind. Because I think, we all have neurology that's like pre-programmed into us, and it can like all mean that we can like overreact and be reactive to situations that are stress inducing. And that's kind of our immediate mind. But then there is another version of ourselves, which is like when we've taken a breath, when we've like sat down and thought about it, when we've not allowed the storm to carry on kind of influencing us, but we've become calm, then our second reaction is what our wise mind might say, which is, this
Hmm.
is going to be okay.
Hmm.
So in a sense, we're like treating the storm as an allegory of like all of the storms of life there.
Hmm.
And Jesus was capable, even though he was just waking up, of taking a breath and saying, "This is okay. We can handle this." And the disciples weren't capable of doing that. That makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah. I just pulled up Mark 4, all of it, and it's a chapter of all parables, some of the parables that we've read in previous weeks. The parable of the growing seed, the parable of the mustard seed, some commentary on the use of parables itself, the lamp under the bushel basket, the purpose of parables explained at the beginning and then at the end. So it's like a block of teaching, but it starts by saying, again, he began to teach them by the sea. Such a very large crowd gathered around him that he got into the boat on the sea and sat there while the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land. And he began to teach them many things in parables. And I love that because it kind of creates a narrative shape for this whole text, which is to say, yeah, he was teaching. He was by the sea. He got in a boat. And then he teaches a whole bunch of parables and there's a whole bunch of teaching. And then at the end, they say, and leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat just as he was. So actually, the beginning of the text says that he got into the boat to start teaching from the boat. So just as he was possibly refers back to that, to say that he'd gotten into the boat to teach. And it still kind of supports that idea that he's so busy, he didn't even get out of the boat to go get a bite to eat or something. He didn't, it's kind of like he sat in the boat to teach. They're like, okay, we're done. We can't get through the crowd. We're just gonna sail out on the sea. And then Jesus sat in the boat where he's been teaching and he just flops. That that
Yes.
that's the picture I'm seeing.
Yeah, because he's so exhausted.
Yeah. I quite like it. I quite like that. Yeah. What else have I seen in here? Well, I do want to say when I'm saying it might be an allegory of the storms of life, I'm not saying that there wasn't also a storm. Can be two things at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, I think he could have spoken to the storm and stilled it. I have to say, playing in my mind as we were reading this, I'm sorry, this is a really silly reference, but I've been watching X-Men 97 on Disney Plus,
Mhm.
which is kind of like a reimagining or a continuation of the X-Men cartoon that was really popular from the 1990s. It started in 1992, finished in 1997, so they're like carrying it on.
Mhm.
Of course, Storm is in the X-Men,
Oh yeah.
who is this character that controls the weather. And at one point, she loses her powers in the series, so she can't control the weather anymore. And then she gets them back when she faces her own darkness. When she faces like the storm inside, she gets
Mhm.
her ability to control the storm. But I also kind of think some of the most dramatic scenes in that cartoon are Storm controlling the weather and like invariably like she ends the argument. It like she takes care of business. She's this like incredible character. And it was making me think just how dramatic this scene is. The idea of Jesus being able to control the weather and the reaction of the disciples, which is like, oh my goodness, who is this? Like that's exactly the kind of effect the storm has in the X-Men. It's like, oh my goodness, who is this? Um, but they're like looking at him and they're like, he can control the weather.
Well, and these are the guys that saw him healing people too. I mean, it's kind of so you know that it was even more fantabulous than that, because it put him in even more awe of him. That's
Yeah.
just, yeah, pretty crazy.
Yeah. Just 1 second. I'm just getting a message I just need to respond to. 1 second.
Can I do a plug for Juneteenth?
Yeah.
Okay, Juneteenth Folsom is having a celebration on Saturday, and it's free. So if people look up on Facebook, just look up Juneteenth Folsom, they can
Okay.
find out the information about it.
Well, and that's a
It's a
very
really nice R&B band that's going to be there. It's free.
oh cool.
They'll have vendors and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, should be a fun
Um,
time.
yeah. Um, so I got distracted a little bit by the message, but that's a really good segue to think about Juneteenth. And I've been thinking about it all week. It's going to be in my vlog this week, my thoughts about it. But I love the fact that we have a holiday for this now. And on holidays in America, my experience is that the different holidays they have a description, they have a reason for existing. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, it's a story about Martin Luther King Jr. and the fight for civil rights and his dream is the story. Independence Day is the day that you became independent from us in England, and that's kind of a story of the founding of the nation. Thanksgiving is the Thanksgiving for the first harvest and every harvest since, which is great. And uh, and also, there's a little shadow side to that because obviously relations with the early Native Americans weren't as rosy as the story sometimes paints the picture. But at its heart, it's about Thanksgiving. And I'm such a sap in some ways. So like, I'll have dinner at my house with friends for Thanksgiving and I'll stop and say to everyone, what are you thankful for this year? There's a story. And then there's a story here for Juneteenth, which is the story of the proclamation, Emancipation Proclamation being read in Galveston, Texas, I think, out loud, because not everybody believed it, and some of the slave owners were keeping the news from their slaves. So I think that the reading out loud of the proclamation was like, let's declare this loudly, you are free, which is wonderful as a story. And I think there are two freedoms that are announced that day. There is the freedom of the slaves from slavery, and there is the freedom of the slave owners from the system that they had created and managed of owning people, which is just deeply wrong and was corrosive to their souls. So there's this idea of this double freedom. It's a holiday for everyone. And I've been thinking about it in the context of prayer, because I think some people might want to say, oh, don't keep on reminding of this bad bit of history, but I'm like, absolutely remind us of this bad bit of history that led to change, growth, and transformation. And one person I was reading online yesterday was saying, you're not being held responsible for the slave owners' actions in the past, but we are held responsible for deconstructing the systems that have been left in place that still keep people unequal today. And that's the ongoing call. So it's like Martin Luther King Jr., the dream, it's to realize the dream. Independence Day, I think it's the idea of continuing kind of the independence of the nation. Thanksgiving is to continue to give thanks. And this is like, here is freedom for these people. And how do we live into freedom forever? How do we live into it more fully, more deeply? So sorry, that was my
Well, and it's also a call for us to look at ways that we unconsciously or consciously keep things in place that perpetuate people not having the freedoms that they should. And so it's kind of like, I remember I had never understood the term white privilege before, and then I read the book with the group and finally was starting to get it. And so my granddaughter and I started this thing where whenever we were together, if we experienced white privilege during that time together, we would call it out to each other. And when we started that, both of us thought that we would very rarely ever experience it. And what was odd was that to us, so we didn't get it, we finally started to get it, is that it was almost an occurrence that happened almost not every time we were out together, but almost every time that we were out together.
Can I back up a second, Cheri? You said
Yeah.
you read a book with a group. Can I ask which book and which group?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that.
Sorry.
And I can't think of the name of the book. It's called The Original Sin. I think that's some of the United States. It's something like that. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the book. That's terrible.
Let me have a see if I can find it. America's Original Sin, Racism, White Privilege, and the Bridge to a New America by Jim Wallace.
Yes, that's it.
That's it. And
And
then
it was And we
Which
read it as
group?
part of a group.
Which group? The church at the
Yeah,
cathedral?
church. It was just a church group that was reading it.
Oh,
We
okay.
went through and read it.
Um, I'm kind of like saying this as a little bit of an aside because people that might watch the podcast might not know that we actually do that. We have a Sunday morning group, we have a Tuesday morning group, and we have a Thursday lunchtime group, all of which are book clubs.
Right.
And book clubs in varying degrees and all do book studies. So I think this is a book study that was done recently in the church, and we put most of that information in the e-news. But I think I've not read America's Original Sin, Racism, White Privilege, and the Bridge to a New America by Jim Wallace. It's from 2015, but you think it's worthwhile read?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It really, anyway, it was
No,
very,
I love it.
it was great to get that because I never really understood that before, but now I definitely get it.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm interested in your practice that you have with your granddaughter, because that's like a contemplative practice in itself. Like I wish to become more conscious of this, so when I notice it, I'm going to call it out in such a way that I begin to recognize it more. And probably at first, as you're looking at it, you might not have like noticed it that much and called it out that much, but after time, you might have said, "Oh, I'm noticing it all the time,"
Right.
which is the beginning of being conscious and aware, so that we can do something with it. Um, I think Jung says that we can't do anything with things we're not conscious of.
Right.
But we can start working on stuff if we are aware.
Right. And I think in doing so with my granddaughter, the thing that happened is it made us understand a much better picture of um that it's something that is happening all the time rather than just, it's not, there are egregious acts as well, but it's happening in everyday life. Um, and so, we're very ordinary people. We're not doing anything exceptional or anything, and we're experiencing that. And so it's anyway.
It's it's all around in everyday life.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. So
And
it's just, yeah. And that was, and I, sometimes what do you want to call it? I feel sad that I didn't really get it. And here I am, this old woman, and I'm finally getting it. But anyway, finally did.
I mean, I'm glad that you're getting it, but also what you're telling me is your granddaughter's getting it and you and her are talking about it. And then that might lead to a raising of her awareness and people around her. And so if we talk about this stuff, more of us get it. Um, the thing that frustrates me a little bit is there are times when I've encountered people and they've kind of seen anti-racism work as kind of this package thing, this one thing that we do. Whereas I kind of have gradually realized more and more that it's a part of the entire sweep of everything we do at the Life of the Cathedral, because it's a part of the gospel. The idea of, as we interpret it in the baptismal covenant, that we should seek the dignity of every human being and fight for justice. It's a part of who we are meant to be in every part of our lives. And I'm kind of comfortable. I got comfortable years ago with the idea that my psychotherapeutic and like psychological journey would never quite be finished, that it's always an ongoing thing. Um, and I don't want to use this as an excuse to not do the work of justice that we need to do now. But the fact that anti-racism work goes on does not mean that what we're doing isn't working.
Right.
Uh, and that we need to do it with more consistency over time, and
Hmm.
recognize when there are things which are um, which are based on white privilege and a white supremacist framework that we set up in order to justify slavery. We've got to still root out those ideas from our culture, from our hearts,
Hmm.
because they've got nothing to do with the gospel. They're nothing to do with Jesus and what he stood for. Yeah.
Very much so.
Somehow I want to go back to the calming of the storm. Uh,
Right.
I think there are all kinds of storms in this process. The storm that comes up when you like react to trying to process anti-racism work, where people sort of get caught up in the fact that it's just too much to cope with. It's too big. That's a storm of emotion in itself.
Mhm.
And we can take a breath and we can tell the storm to be peaceful and say, no, let's keep doing this. Because that's the interesting thing about the text. Jesus is teaching in the boat because it's so busy that he can't get on the land. Then to get him to leave, they row out because he can't get off the boat and get into land. So they just take him the way he is. When he gets to the end of that boat ride, after he slept a bit, he's going to carry on doing the work. Um, he's going to carry on telling people about the kingdom of God. He's going to carry on healing people. He's going to carry on teaching them in parables. The work has to continue and the storms interrupt it. And how do we look at and face the storms? I'm trying to be poetic and allegorical, Cheri, and I don't know if it's entirely landing.
No, I think I get it. It's I think we've all looked at turbulent times or tough times in our life. A way to look at it as a storm is a good picture because it feels pretty all-encompassing
Yeah,
the time you're going through it. So a storm is a good allegory for that, I think.
yeah,
You know, um, and and I think having that picture of being, say, what were the words? Is it's peace be still?
yeah.
Is that what it is?
Peace be
So
still.
peace be still. It's kind of like, put that in our little arsenal when we're getting overwhelmed with something that's going on in our life. It's like just take that breath and say, peace be still.
Oh my God, yeah, use it like a self-talk. Like
Yeah, like a self-talk.
say to myself, peace be still.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. The art of self-soothing is in itself a kind of an interesting thing. The ability to be able to notice when we're feeling turbulent, when we're feeling the storms of life, and just saying to ourselves, peace be still, and going
Mm-hmm.
like sitting, maybe meditating, maybe praying, maybe going for a walk with the dog, or for me, or like sitting down in the garden, listening to bird song, noticing nature, noticing creation, noticing that everything's kind of okay around me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's sometimes, just like you said, dealing with a lot of what's going on in our world right now just seems overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so having that vision of, yeah, we're in the middle of this big old storm and it's a really tough one, but the peace be still, it's like, okay, we can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so that's good.
Listen, Cheri, I'm going to read this reading to us one more time, and I'm going to ask you to ask yourself this next question, which is, what is God asking you to do now in the light of this reading? Okay?
Hmm.
When evening had come, Jesus said to his disciples, let us go across to the other side and leave the crowd behind. They took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace be still. Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? What is God asking you to do now in the light of this reading, Cheri?
I'm not sure. I say that a lot. Um, I think that it's for me, what I'm getting from what I need to do is two things. One is to use my faith as a way of dealing with the storms in my life. Because a lot of times my initial reaction is to just is whatever it is, but I really need to, uh, really pause and rely on that faith. And then the other thing is that the thing about the peace be still. But I also think too, it's kind of like looking at all of those things, and what you're talking about is listening to that wise self, what you said. Listen to that wise self. Don't forget the wise self.
Yeah.
So
I am thinking of another thing here, which is don't forget to sleep.
yes, get your rest.
Get your rest. Jesus needed his rest. Get your rest in order to keep on doing the things you need to do. Um, okay. I'm going to say a prayer now and draw us to a close if that's okay, Cheri.
Yes,
God be with you.
and also with you.
Loving God, we thank you for your son who ministered to people and then who fell asleep because he was exhausted, and who, when called on, could still calm the storms in his disciples' hearts and on the lake. Help us to look to that Jesus when our hearts are turbulent and when the world around us is stormy. Help us to look to that Jesus and have faith that there is a better way, that we are going to be safe, that we are okay in his hands. We ask this for the sake of your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheri. That was great. That was helpful.
Thank you very much.
All right. God
All right.
bless. Bye.
Bye-bye.